What began as just another hectic night at a luxury restaurant in Manhattan ended with a waitress kneeling on the floor, picking up dollar bills thrown by a millionaire who laughed at his own cruelty. Surrounded by looks of contempt and muffled laughter, she endured the greatest humiliation of her life in front of an entire table that took pleasure in the scene. What those men did not know was that such behavior would not go unpunished. The bill was about to arrive, and no one there was prepared to pay the price. It was the last week of the year, and the restaurant was filled with discreet celebrations. Executives toasted closed deals and investors spoke of numbers that needed no explanation, and restrained laughter echoed just enough to be heard by those nearby. It was an ordinary night for those who had always had everything. But not for those who worked there. The young waitress, Anne, crossed the dining room with steady steps and constant attention. She knew that environment better than any customer. She could identify demanding tables, impatient looks, gestures that announced trouble even before words were spoken. Even so, there was something different about the table at the center. 6 men, expensive suits, glasses always full, and laughter far too loud for a place that valued control. They occupied the space as if they owned it. "This calls for a toast," murmured the man with the loosened tie, raising his glass. "To another year in which we learned who's in charge and who serves." The glasses clinked. The laughter grew. When the waitress approached for the first time, balancing a tray with water glasses, she felt the look settle on her in a different way. One of them watched her with a half-smile, far too attentive. At the moment she extended her hand to pour water into the glass, he pulled the glass toward himself, causing the water to spill across the immaculate surface. "Oh, careful," he said, laughing. "You almost got everything wet." The laughter came immediately. "Sorry, sir," she replied, even knowing she had done nothing wrong. And took the cloth and wiped the table quickly, trained movements meant to show no discomfort. The millionaire kept smiling, watching every gesture, as if evaluating a reaction that never came. When she turned to leave, she heard another voice. "Bring more water. Looks like we're going to need it." The tone was not a request. It was a warning. She nodded and continued working. The dining room maintained its elegant routine, but at that table, something was beginning to take shape. It was not haste. It was not demand. It was provocation. Have you ever been in her place, just trying to work while someone belittled you? Comment strength and leave your message of support. From afar, some customers already noticed that something was wrong, but they quickly looked away. In places like that, discomfort rarely turned into action. She moved away from the table with a cold premonition in her chest, as if that dark cloud were still only forming, and did not usually reflect much on her own routine. Thinking too much made everything heavier. She woke up early, crossed the city before the sun fully settled between the buildings, and arrived at the restaurant always a few minutes before her shift. Her salary barely covered the basics, but it helped at home and kept everything running. It was not an easy life, but it was an honest one, and, until that night, that had always been enough. When she returned to the central table to take the orders, she felt the atmosphere change. The 6 men watched her in silence for a few seconds, as if deciding something without needing to speak. One of them closed the menu with controlled force and rested his elbows on the table. Finally, he said, looking directly at her, "Let's order," and stepped closer with the notepad in hand, professional posture, restrained voice. The man with the loosened tie began to speak slowly, detailing the order more than necessary, as if testing her attention. Another interrupted midway, changing an ingredient. A third laughed and added something different, and wrote everything down carefully, confirming each item. She nodded and stepped away. Before she even reached the kitchen, she heard low laughter coming from the table. When she returned with the dishes, the game truly began. One of the men examined the plate as if searching for a flaw. "This isn't what I ordered," and quickly checked her notepad. "It's exactly as requested, sir." "No, it's not," he replied, pushing the plate a few inches away. "You must have mixed it up again." "I can check with the kitchen," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Of course you can," another replied, smiling. "Looks like you're going to have plenty of time to learn today." She took the plate and walked away, feeling her face grow warm. It wasn't about the food. It never had been. When she returned with the adjusted dish, the comment came before she even reached the table. "Let's see if you get it right this time," one of them said, loud enough to be heard by those nearby. And set the plate down carefully. Adjusted the cutlery. Stepped back. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" one of them muttered. She tried to walk away, but was interrupted again. "Hey, bring wine," one of them ordered, without looking. "And this time, fill the glass properly." As she served, he deliberately tilted the glass, letting a few drops run across the table. "Look at that," he said, laughing. "Again." "Sorry," and replied automatically, grabbing the cloth. "You apologize all the time," another commented. "Ever thought about trying to get it right?" Each return made to that table came with a new comment, a new test, a new mocking smile. When she stepped away, she was called back. When she returned, she was corrected. The humiliation stopped being casual and began to feel organized. It was then that, as she moved away once more, something different caught her attention in the dining room. From the back, a man seated alone watched everything with excessive calm. He did not speak, did not gesture. He simply observed, like someone who recognizes a pattern before it fully reveals itself. And did not know who he was. But, for the first time that night, she felt that the humiliation was not going unnoticed. And while the table of millionaires prepared for the next step, something silent began to change the course of that night. A silent warning of what was yet to come. And felt her body grow heavier with each return to that table. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the awareness of being watched, judged, and used as entertainment. Every step toward it felt longer. Every approach, more tense. Even so, she kept going. Because she had to. Because stopping was not an option. "Hey," one of them called, snapping his fingers in the air. "Since you're passing by, check the bill." The tone was casual, almost bored, as if everything that had happened until then meant absolutely nothing. And nodded and returned minutes later with the leather folder in her hands. She approached carefully, posture straight, eyes lowered. She placed the bill on the table, right at the center. The man with the loosened tie took the paper, glanced at it briefly, and let out a short laugh. "All this?" he asked, looking at the others. "Looks like working hard really is expensive. Would you like me to explain any item, sir?" Anne asked, keeping her voice steady. "No," he replied. "I want you to wait." He took his time on purpose. Drank the last sip of wine. Talked to his friends. Made irrelevant comments while Anne remained there, motionless, feeling the seconds stretch far too long. Some customers were now watching openly. The discomfort was visible. But the silence remained. Finally, the man stood up slowly. He opened his wallet with exaggeration, pulling out dollar bills one by one, as if he wanted everyone to see. He looked at Anne for a moment longer than necessary. "You know what I like most?" he said. "It's when people understand exactly what their place is." Before she could react, he released the bills from his hand and the money fell to the floor. The bills spread across the immaculate marble at Anne's feet, contrasting with the restaurant's shine. For a second, no one said anything. Not even his friends laughed right away. The gesture was too strong. Too cruel. "You can pick it up," he said, breaking the silence. "It's for you." The laughter came soon after. Not all of it. But enough. And felt her face burn. Her heart pounded too hard to be ignored. She looked around. She saw eyes turning away. She saw embarrassment. She saw curiosity. But she did not see help. The manager watched from a distance, paralyzed between the fear of losing important clients and the awareness that something had crossed every possible line. Anne hesitated. For a moment too brief, she thought about not bending down. She thought about turning her back. She thought about saying something. But reality was faster. The household bills. The next shift. The job. She took a deep breath and bent down, every movement feeling like an eternity. Every second, a wait. Just like that. The arrogant millionaire commented, laughing. Very efficient. And stood up with the bills in her hand, her gaze fixed on some point straight ahead. She didn't respond. She simply endured. It was at that moment that the silence at the back of the dining room changed in nature. A chair moved slowly. There was no announcement. There were no words. Just the controlled sound of someone standing up. And didn't know yet. Neither did the millionaires. But that scene had been witnessed from beginning to end by someone who did not confuse money with power. And from that instant on, the humiliation ceased to be the final act of that night and became the beginning of the consequence. The man who stood up came from the back of the restaurant. Until that moment, few had noticed him. He dressed soberly, without ostentation, but walked with the calm of someone who needed to prove nothing to anyone. His steps were firm, controlled, and every meter he advanced seemed to reduce the space around the millionaire's table. The conversations stopped one by one. When he stopped in front of the table, he did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Interesting, he said, looking at the bills still in Anne's hands. I watched everything. The man with the loosened tie tried to smile. Is there a problem? The imposing man who had just arrived slightly tilted his head. Yes. A serious problem. Then he added, with absolute calm, this restaurant is mine. The silence that followed was different from all the others that night. It was not embarrassment. It was belated recognition. From the very first glass pulled away, he continued, every comment, every laugh, everything was recorded. He discreetly touched the phone in his suit pocket. Audio and video. Unedited. Faces began to lose color. Now, before anyone tries to explain anything, he said, let me clarify something. I know very well the company you work for. I know exactly which contracts it values, and which behaviors would not survive public exposure. The arrogant millionaire who had thrown the money on the floor opened his mouth, but no words came out. The restaurant owner turned to the waitress, took the bills she had collected, and held them between his fingers for a moment, observing them as if that money had lost all its value. Then, without haste, he threw the bills back onto the floor, this time, in front of everyone at the table. Now it's your turn, he said, looking at the same man who had humiliated the waitress. The shock was immediate. What? He stammered. Bend down, the owner replied, his voice firm. Pick up the money. And then you will return each bill to the waitress. After that, you will apologize. Out loud. This is absurd. Another man at the table tried to protest. The owner slowly turned toward him. The absurdity happened when you thought money bought dignity. He paused briefly. This is your only chance to leave here with something other than a public scandal. The entire dining room watched. The manager did not breathe. The customers did not blink. The man hesitated. He looked at his friends. None of them met his eyes now. He swallowed hard and bent down. The gesture was clumsy, humiliating, exactly as it had been for the waitress minutes earlier. He picked up the bills one by one, feeling the weight of every gaze. When he stood up, his face was red, his smile completely gone. He held the money out to Anne. I'm sorry, he said, too softly. Louder! The owner corrected. The man took a deep breath. I'm sorry. His voice faltered. I apologize for what I did. And took the money with steady hands. She said nothing, she didn't need to. The restaurant owner then turned to the entire table. Now, leave. All of you. And he added, and consider this night a warning. Not all power is visible. But all disrespect comes at a price. The men stood up in silence, one by one, leaving behind empty glasses, pushed back chairs, and a shattered reputation. When the dining room finally breathed again, the owner looked at Anne. You didn't have to go through this, he said, with a tone that was finally human. But you kept your dignity when no one demanded it from you. That cannot be bought. And nodded, feeling something different in her chest. Not relief. Something greater. That night, no one applauded. There was no celebration. But, for the first time, the one who had been humiliated walked out standing tall. And the one who thought he was in charge, left looking at the floor. Perhaps what hurts most in this story is not the money thrown on the ground, but the ease with which some people believe they have the right to diminish others. At some point in life, almost everyone has been in Anne's place, just trying to work, to move forward, while someone uses power or status to humiliate. Stories like this remind us that character is not measured by what someone owns, but by how they treat those who seem to have no choice, because, in the end, that is what reveals who we truly are.